All right, so my name is Jesse, and I am the lead of the Conservation Stories Canada project. Just last week, I had the chance to sit down with Jared Tommy to talk about some of the amazing things going on in Cape Breton Highlands National Park, one of the most iconic and amazing places in this country. And we continue this series today with Sarah Penney, who has the incredible and very unwieldy title of Coordinator of the Cape Breton Highlands Atlantic Park Salmon Recovery Program. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to you about this project. It's really important and exciting for me, so sharing it is just a pleasure.
It's so exciting getting to hear about salmon because, I mean, a lot of the topics, of course, I've covered have been mammals. People, sort of naturally flock to charismatic megafauna, big mammals, cougars, moose, all that stuff. And so to talk about a species that's really important and a little bit different is really special. And so first and foremost, Sarah, I just want to ask, where are these salmon coming from? How are they getting there? Are they coming up rivers in Cape Breton, all year long for a special time of year? What's the situation with them?
Sure. So salmon at Cape Breton Highlands National Park is really an interesting story. We have salmon who live in a couple of different watersheds across the park. On the west side, we have the Camp River with a salmon run, and the Clybourne Brook, where I do most of my work, is on the east side, and that has this big salmon run. And then there's the North Aspy River in the middle with a big salmon run, and others scattered throughout. So when they come back really depends on where you are. So in the Shetty Camp, there's a spring run and a fall run. And on the other side, in the Clybourne, we mainly have salmon coming from the ocean to spawn in the fall. But they have this really fascinating life cycle, right, that takes them all over the place. So they start out their life in the river as an egg in the fall after they're spawned by their parents. Then they'll hatch in the spring, and they'll stay in the river for a couple of years, swimming around and eating bugs and doing those kinds of things. But then when they reach the smolt stage, they decide to leave the river and go on this epic journey in the ocean that can take them as far as Greenland, when they spend a few years swimming around the ocean, growing and getting bigger, and then they come all the way back to Cape Breton Highlands, to the river where they were born, and swim back up and spawn again. So it's where a salmon goes is a big question and a big answer.
Yeah.
I hope that helps.
There's a few things that I've never heard before. Personally, I've never heard that they spend a few years in their home river before they head out. I've never heard that they come back for multiple times in a year, and I'm curious what this actually looks like. So again, Cape Breton Highlands, to me, I'm picturing these salmon going like straight up the mountain, but what does this actually look like when you're in the field with them?
Oh, well, the Clybourne Brook is just incredible. So we're called Cape Breton Highlands for a reason, right? It's the place where the mountains meet the sea. Yeah. So in the Clybourne Valley, just imagine this like beautiful, pristine water. And on either side, there's these super steep slopes covered in trees that go up, like practically straight up, and then they level off into a plateau. And in the springtime, when I'm doing some of my salmon work, it's beautiful and leafy and lovely down in the stream. And you look up and the plateau is white with snow. And you have a t-shirt on and it's just ice up there. It's beautiful and incredible. And there's parts of the river that are pretty easygoing. You can walk and it would be easy to swim. And then there are other places that are a several meter high waterfall with huge rocks and water shooting out of it like a fire hose, and the salmon jump up there too. So hard to stop them from going where they want to go.
When I'm here in Toronto, we have some Atlantic salmon for part of the year that have been released into the lakes, and they, traverse these little like 3-foot waterfalls. So there's a picture of this. I think people have seen pictures in like Alaska where they're dodging bears and going up giant waterfalls. And it's just amazing to think about this life cycle and what a special place to get to experience it in. Thank you for painting that picture for us. So, you're working on recovering their populations, which naturally implies that they've been declining. And do we understand why they've been declining? What's the scale of this? Like, what's actually happening with these salmon populations?
Sure. So salmon have a really wide range, especially Atlantic salmon. They live all up the eastern seaboard of the U.S. and throughout Atlantic Canada, and even across the pond. So to specify exactly what threatens Atlantic salmon is difficult because it's going to depend a little bit on where you are. But the thing they have in common is the ocean. So COSIWIC, which is the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, a panel of experts that looks into threats to species. They've indicated that poorly understood changes in ocean habitat is a significant likely contributor. So climate change is probably bundled in there. So that's, broadly speaking, that's something that threatens salmon. In the Clybourne Brook in particular, we've been monitoring the population there since the mid-'80s by swimming down the river when they've come to spawn in order to count them. And back in the day, 1985 or 86, we were seeing 180 some salmon, which is incredible to imagine. And I have to imagine it because now we only see, 10 or 15, sometimes as few as 5 salmon coming back to spawn. So the decline has really been huge.
Yeah. This is one of the things conservation is that there's positive stories, and that's one of the things I'm trying to highlight with Conservation Stories Canada. But it is there's a huge amount of damage that's already been done. So we're really working to try and preserve populations where we can, save things, and bring them back where the situation might be more dire. And so I'm so curious what your science actually looks like. When you're out there, either in the field or in the lab. You already painted a picture of how beautiful and stunning it is. What are you actually doing on a day-by-day basis when you're out there trying to monitor these salmon and understand more about them?
Yeah, so our monitoring program includes a number of things. So we do the snorkel survey, which I described before, where we get on our dry suits and our snorkels and swim down the chilly November rivers of the park to count salmon. In the summertime and late or into the fall, we do some juvenile sampling where we try to see how many baby salmon are living in the rivers. And the core of our restoration program that I'm coordinating is some supplementation work. So what we do is we collect those smolt as they're headed out to the ocean. Remember, this is where the danger seems to be happening, where they're seeing a lot of mortality and then not coming back. So we collect them before they get there, raise them to maturity in the Dalhousie Aquatron Laboratory, which is a land-based aquatic research facility. So they keep them and feed them and grow them up to the adult stage. And then we'll take them back to the river and release them so they can find a mate and dig a redd and spawn naturally. And that is our plan for increasing the number of salmon that are spawning in the river, allow them to have more babies, and boost the population back up. So it's work that's it's difficult. We've seen some preliminary success in other parks, and we're really committed to trying to bring the population back from the brink and see an improvement in the salmon population here.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. This picture of scientists in their dry suits snorkeling down the river slowly, meandering like icebergs, and someone walking on one of the trails coming upon you guys and just wondering what on earth is going on is amazing for me to picture. For releasing them back into the public, one thing that I've seen here with the Toronto Zoo, it's been done around Canada and the world, is getting the community involved and helping release those spawn back into the wild. Now, of course, these are a species under threat. There might be risks associated with that. Do you do that sort of work in Cape Breton Highlands?
Well, actually, this fall will be our very first salmon release. So I'm equal parts excited and terrified. And I'm really hoping to get some public involvement. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, both because of concerns around the salmon and access to the site and what's going on in the world generally. So I would love to make a promise that we're going to have an orchestra and all kinds of people and cake. But I don't know that yet.
I seriously, you do have an orchestra and cake, because that sounds amazing. I like that that's where your mind naturally went. I'm very excited to see the pictures if you pull that off. So speaking of sort of the community connection with the river, with these places, one of the things that I've covered in a few interviews so far is hunting and fishing, and sort of my own personal journey from finding it something that was very destructive universally towards wild habitats and species to something that can really, when it's managed well, be a really essential element of conservation. And so I'm curious, with the Atlantic salmon, I guess when they're out in the ocean, there's no way to prevent them being fished. Is there fishing of these salmon? Is there any work like that, or is it a ban, or is there any thought of this whatsoever? I'm just curious.
So it really depends on where in the park you are. So it's certainly, I would agree that people who spend a lot of time out in nature doing things like hunting and fishing have a special connection with the environment and with the animals. And in particular, Indigenous communities and Indigenous harvesters are stewards of the environment and have that connection in a very special way. So In on the Shetty River, we have a bit healthier run, so we do have catch and release fishing there. But in the Clybourne, the situation is so dire that we don't have even catch and release angling for salmon. But hopefully, with our if our project goes well and the population bounces back, maybe in years and decades to come, we will be able to reinstate activities like that and allow people to come face to face with fish and really build that connection.
Yeah. How special is that? I mean, you highlighted this first effort to get people involved in actually releasing them, which is fantastic. Is there anything else that people can do, whether they're in Cape Breton Highlands, whether they're across Canada, around the world, to help protect this population? I mean, it really does sound like you guys are the last bastion, the people that are really helping do all the essential work to make sure this species survives in this area. But is there something, I'm here in Toronto, that I could actually do to help take action, support what you're doing?
Well, I feel really fortunate that I'm working on an animal like salmon that is so important and so special to so many people. As far as I'm concerned, helping salmon anywhere is helping salmon everywhere. So, in your local community, if there are organizations that are doing salmon restoration work or habitat restoration work, supporting them is always a good idea. If you're traveling around, it's a great idea to make sure that if you are going angling, you're aware of what the rules and regulations are, and that you're doing that in a safe and sustainable way. Making sure that your gear is clean, depending if you're coming from a place that maybe has invasive species and going to a place where that species isn't present. We can all be mindful of how we behave in and around streams anywhere, and help preserve the ecosystem wherever we go. So those would be some of my suggestions. But I like I said, there's lots of organizations and people out there who are working toward salmon restoration and conservation. So I'm just one in a million.
Well, you're doing amazing work, and thank you so much for sharing those options. Again, when we talked about bats with Jared, we talked about the fact that cleaning gear when you go to the field is really important. So wherever you're traveling in the country or around the world, that's a really important element to help protect local species from pathogens or other things you could inadvertently bring into the environment. Sarah, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I really, really appreciate your time and your enthusiasm for salmon and for conservation in general. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I had an awesome time.